How do we work together to stop sending smart young boys in particular to jail to ruin their lives rather than funneling them into more creative jobs which will benefit the community and enrich everyone, and particularly themselves, of course?
Yeah, we kind of deal with it sort of three ways, if you will. I mean, on the one hand, you have things that are happening like the AT&T Aspire Accelerator. And what
does that mean? What is that?
An accelerator is a place where if you have a great idea, you have a fledgling company, you bring it to accelerate the growth of the company. And the Aspire Accelerator is focused on ed tech companies that help close gaps. And so, focusing on K through 12 education, figuring out how we close the achievement gap, which in many ways is a resource gap. And there's a whole suite of ed tech companies that.
What does that mean, the resource gap?
Well, about 80% of the so-called achievement gap can be explained by the maldistribution of resources. The number one resource is a highly qualified teacher. If you were to evenly distribute highly qualified teachers, half of that 80% would disappear overnight. And so that so that's kind of one end. At the other end, you have things that are dealing with the incarceration population itself. The biggest thing in the middle is actually understanding that all of our young people, not black ones or poor ones or ones who are headed to prison, but all of our young people are hurt by mass incarceration. There's basically three big effects, right? One is we have more incarcerated people than any other planet on the country, and we spend more money on it than any other country on the planet. Two is
even China, right?
Yeah. Two is that the price of college has gone up tremendously as a result. That if you look at state budgets, like for instance California, 40 years ago, California spent 11% of its state budget on public universities and community colleges and 3% on prison. Last time I checked, about 5 years ago, it was 11% on prisons, 7.5% on public universities. That decline in state subsidy explains in part the large increase in family subsidy, otherwise known as tuition. We start charging kids more because the state invests less. But then there's the kids in the middle who are just deciding not to go to college because it's just simply too expensive. All of our 18-year-olds are being hurt. We have to stop pretending like mass incarceration only hurts those kids. We have to understand that it is hurting, impoverishing, limiting the future of all of our kids.
Hillary Shelton, you're nodding. I assume in agreement with what Ben is saying. I know you're a VP at the NAACP. How central, in your view, is what Ben is talking about, technology innovation, for solving these core problems of social justice in America?
They're indispensable. They're crucial. As a matter of fact, we speak about them in these terms. What you have is something that gains access or gives access to people who normally wouldn't have it. We represent a community. If I think about the African American community in and of itself, we're overrepresented when we think about technologies like the little computers we have on our belt buckles. Those things that give us access to the internet, access to the information. You can fill out applications to be able to get grants or even to go to school. That kind of access through technology is what actually opens the door and paves the way. And quite frankly, we like to say not only blazes the path, but paves the road. It gives a real opportunity to go where no one else has gone before. So I strongly agree. Look, I think about the technology bubble. The 1990s, coming into 2000 and whatnot, the Clinton administration, and a young man named Darian Dash, 27-year-old kid that ended up making over $3 billion. He actually canned the phrase in my mind for doing good and doing well. In essence, the point you're making, Ben, is right on target. That is, there seems to be something that drives us sometimes to be able to move not only to being able to put the food on the table and pay the rent, but also pay forward towards even changing the very evolution of our society. I think it's crucial, and I think it's absolutely necessary. Corporations like AT&T that are opening the doors for these young minds that may not have the deep pocketbooks of their parents to be able to show just how brilliant those minds are and how far that vision can take them, again, is absolutely crucial and will make the difference in our society, not only tomorrow, but in generations to come.
So right now, all around the country, when you use a payphone in a prison, it costs, 50 times what it costs to just use your cell phone or to use your home phone. 50 times. Most people don't have a clue. They don't know. I could say this in a room all over the country, and nobody would know what I was saying. And when we talked about it before the FCC, I called it a tax on people's pain, right? Because when you go to jail, your family spends all the money, right? Whether you did it or whether you didn't do it, they still have to help you get a lawyer. Some of these people are putting their houses up. So now you strip the wealth of this family. But guess what? When they start having to keep in touch with you so that their family is not the other prisoners, but still you, they spend all their money calling you on the phone. And so when Ben reaches out and lifts up a starter like Pigeonly.
Pigeonly is a startup that's cut the cost of calling home from prison by about 90%. Founded by Frederick Hudson, who's a black, formerly incarcerated guy who I was talking about earlier, the guy who bought the UPS store.
Right.
And actually his co-founder was a graduate of Morgan State University, which goes to the power and the role that HBCUs are and can be playing in even greater regard.
But could a young white guy have done that, or does it take someone who understands?
Well, certainly. And look, we have 1 million black men in prison. We have 1 million white men in prison. I think the question to ask, and really in some ways, is somebody from a disadvantaged background. Period. In this state, you have people who have lived sort of in one form of slavery or the other ever since chattel slavery, wage slavery. But you also have people whose families who have been, white families, been in and out of prison since the Georgia Penal Colony. And fundamentally, when we talk about social disruption and we talk about innovation, we have to ultimately be signing up to disrupt all of that, right? The sort of race, the racism that keeps one group of people locked down and locked up, and the classism that keeps a very different group of people locked down and locked up.